अस्सलाम वालेकुम एंड वेलकम टू PJME's ऑफिशियल यूट्यूब चैनल। बड़ी बातचीत हो रही है कि पाकिस्तान को इज़राइल को एक्सेप्ट करना चाहिए या नहीं करना चाहिए। वजह क्या है, क्यों नहीं कर रहे। हम अड़े हुए हैं कि फ़लस्तीन का पहले मसला हो, तो मैं समझता हूँ कि फ़लस्तीनियों को भी साथ खड़ा होना चाहिए ना पाकिस्तान के कि कश्मीर का मसला हो। हम कश्मीर के मसले पे फ़लस्तीन से कोई बात नहीं आती है, ये मैं आपको बता रहा हूँ, कोई बात नहीं आती है। हम चाचे बने हुए फ़लस्तीन के, बनना भी चाहिए, लेकिन ये दोनों तरफ गाड़ी चलती है। तो मैंने तो अपने घर को देखना है, फ़लस्तीन में बाद में देखना है। तो ये जो हम यहाँ इधर बैठ के ना चाचे मामे बांध जाते हैं लोगों के कि हाँ जी फ़लस्तीन फ़लस्तीन, और कश्मीर की आवाज़ पहले लगाओ। कश्मीर में देखो क्या हो रहा है, हिंदुस्तान तुम्हारे घर के साथ क्या कर रहा है, इसको तुम देखो। ये मेन चीज़ होती है बात करने की। हम इधर चले जाते हैं, उधर चले जाते हैं, और ये अपने घर को पहले तुम संभालो। एक चीज़, मैंने एक इंटरव्यू किया शिमोन पेरेस का, जो कि वज़ीर आज़म इसके थे इज़राइल के। ये इंटरव्यू भी मैं आपको दिखाता हूँ अभी, और ये क्या इंटरव्यू उन्होंने बात किया कि क्या क्या वजह है। याद रखो, दुनिया के अंदर मसला कोई भी ठीक नहीं हो सकता जब आप दोनों तरफ नहीं सुनते हो। ये असूल है इंसानियत का। तो ये इंटरव्यू देखिए आप पहले, और फिर मैं आपसे और बात करता हूँ। Welcome to the program, Mr. Perez. Now, this is for the first time you are here in a captive audience of Muslims all over the world.
Thank you very much.
Now, we see this war, countries go to war with each other, but here today, Israel says it is not really at war with Lebanon. So who is it at war with then?
Hezbollah, who is at the service of the Iranians in our thinking. They're under the spell of the Iranians. And apparently they are trying to convert Lebanon, which is a multinational country, into a Shiite country. We can't understand why did Hezbollah start it. We can't understand what is the purpose of it. And when we look at the price that cost the Lebanese and us, it makes it almost criminal. Why should there have been 1,000 people in Lebanon killed? Totally unnecessary. Why should they have 600,000 refugees? Totally unnecessary, unreasonable. What did they achieve? Why should they have send 200 rockets and missiles over the heads of Israel? What for? And now, because there is an image of a victory, which is an empty image. So I think it's a mistake.
So would you call this a justifiable war?
No, I would call it a totally unnecessary and unjustified war. Totally.
Now there are plans that Israel might plan a major offensive in the event that the resolutions of the United Nations don't go ahead. So would that be the right thing to do?
No, we are not making any offensive. If the United Nations resolutions will not go through, we shall have to defend ourselves against the missiles, because they are continuing to fire missiles against us. That's all. We don't look for any territory. We are not interested in the Lebanese land or waters or politics. There is not the slightest reason for a dispute between us and the Lebanese. We don't want anything from them, and I don't think the Lebanese want anything from us. On the contrary, we think the Lebanese are able people, that we can live together. As I've said, a multinational group of people, and we can understand the feelings of every minority. So why fight? What for? And then, many of our friends and enemies used to tell us, land for peace. We gave back all the land. Why didn't we get peace?
Now, Prime Minister Olmert has apologized for the killing of one Canadian UNIFIL soldier. But who's going to apologize for the soldiers killed for the people killed in Lebanon and soldiers killed in Israel?
The Hezbollah. They have to. They started it without any provocation, any reason. I look around, and then yesterday he made another mistake, Mr. Nasrallah. He called to the Arabs, who are citizens of Haifa, to leave Haifa. It reminds me exactly what happened 58 years ago, when the Mufti of Jerusalem called the Arabs from Haifa to leave Haifa. He started the refugee problem. We told them, remain. You are safe. Believe in peace. No, he says, leave, I shall bring you back as a victorious people. And now Nasrallah repeats the same slogans, the same mistakes, the same foolishness. And I can't understand it.
Now, it is understandable that Israel has a point that two of his soldiers have been kidnapped. But there are people who say that there are a number of people who have been in captivity in Israel for the past 20 years. So what about those people?
Usually you negotiate the release of prisoners by negotiations, not by bombs. For example, take the case of the Palestinians, the Hamas, who took hostage of our soldiers. Just a few days before it, our Prime Minister met with Abu Mazen, the head of the Palestinian Authority. He says, let's talk, I'm ready to release hundreds of the prisoners. What is now stopping the release of the prisoners is the fact that they have taken one of our soldiers in hostage, and now we are under pressure, and we can't do it. So the people remain in prison simply because, again, an overrated and extreme logic.
Now, what would you have done personally if you were the Prime Minister today of the country?
I would defend myself if I would be attacked. And I would also try to see what can be done in order to stop this attack, preferably by political means. We are not looking for a military victory. A victory in our mind is peace. We do not want to build another Arc de Triomphe in the gates of Jerusalem. What we want is to have a friendly relationship with our neighbors. We have to live with them. We don't hate them. And we think all the wars were a mistake, totally unnecessary. From our standpoint, we were attacked 5 times before it by superior Arab armies. We were outmanned, outgunned, and we have had to fight. We were left without a choice. But our preference is not military victories. Our preference is full peace, sincere and honorable to all sides.
Now, when you speak of peace and honorable peace, so how do you go about and plan an honorable peace with the Palestinians?
No, well, it's a good question. The answer is very simple. You know, we have had a debate in Israel between right and left. The right was traditionally for the greater Israel, namely keeping the West Bank and Gaza under the Israeli control. Now the right agreed that there will be a Palestinian state, independent. Mr. Sharon, who came from the right, left Gaza unilaterally without condition. We told the Palestinians that we are ready to continue the negotiations about the West Bank in accordance with the roadmap and for the creation of a Palestinian state. And that was the opening position. So again, we don't understand why do they need a Hamas with rifles and bombs and rockets, shooting and killing people.
Now, Mr. Peres, there's one thing which people are quite curious about, that all over the world you are recognized as a man who goes for peace, and yet in your own country you don't get that mandate. Why is that?
Again, I shall answer you. After the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin, we were colleagues. I replaced him as the Prime Minister for the second or third time. And I handed over to the Palestinians 460 villages. Not everybody in Israel liked it. They thought that I give away too much. Then we handed over 6 cities. Then they asked for free elections. Yes. They asked to have free elections in Jerusalem. Yes. And in a matter of 3 months, they started an act of suicidal terror in Jerusalem. You know, at 7 o'clock when I went to my office, and my security people told me a bus was exploded in the heart of Jerusalem. I came there were over 40 people killed, 100 wounded. The square was covered with blood. There were thousands of people. When I came in, they started to shout, "Traitor, look what you did to us." The next day, they repeated in Tel Aviv. The next day, again in Jerusalem. The next day, again in Ashkelon. So people say, what are you doing? You're giving back land. What did you get in return? You don't know how to handle it. And the Palestinians too, they couldn't explain. The only explanation was that they couldn't control the Hamas. And I know that after I lost the elections by 0.5%, and I lost because of it. Many of the leaders were crying, but it was too late. So look what happened. I went a long way, not a very popular one. I didn't ask for any compliments or return, but neither could I take. acts of terror so wild and inexplicable.
Now, what is your next move? Where do you go from here? Now, there is a possibility that you might become the president of Israel.
It's not my title which means so much. It's the service I'm trying to give my people and my country. Whether popular under this title, less title, that's unimportant. I think for a political person the problem is not what to be, but what to do. And I'm clearly going to continue to work for peace in spite of all the disappointments and regressions and quarrels. Because I think on 2 occasions we achieved almost full peace with the Egyptians and the Jordanians. And on the agenda now is to make full peace with the Palestinians. And I, for one, will not give up the efforts, in spite of whatever was said or I said, to bring it to a peaceful end.
But when you speak of peace with Jordan, Egypt, and of course the Palestinians, and then perhaps Lebanon is around the corner, but don't you feel peace with Iran and perhaps even with Syria is more imminent?
With Iran, they don't want peace. They want the destruction of Israel. Iran is the only country on earth, a member of the United Nations, that calls for the destruction of another member of a nation. It's very unique, you know. And it started not only with the state, it started with Szymon Rushdie. Suppose Szymon Rushdie wrote a book they didn't like. But the country cannot say, I'm going to kill him. We don't accept it. Whether you are a Muslim or a Jew or a Christian, only the Lord can give life and take away life. But when somebody is above the Lord himself as a killer, then what do you need the religions for? We don't accept it. And as long, Iran is one story and the Ayatollahs are another story. We have had very good relations with the Iranian people for years and generations. The most friendly king, Cyrus, came from Persia, and they let the Jewish people come to Israel. The Ayatollahs, in my judgment, are a passing phenomena because they don't have a message, neither for their own people, not for the Muslim land. I think they bring a shame on them, not for the rest of humanity. They have a protest, a bitterness, but a protest doesn't serve neither the people nor the future. So for that reason, I hope Iran will be blessed with a better and more civilized government.
Now, in the longer perspective, how do you see Pakistan's role? How do you see Pakistan's role as somebody who's a nuclear power?
The problem is not if Pakistan is a nuclear power, but if you have a responsible government. The difference is not a religious one. The difference is of a responsibility. Why are people so alarmed with the problem of Iran having a bomb? Because they're afraid of the irresponsibility of the government. If Pakistan will have a responsible government, okay? And then I see that the Pakistanis and the Indians itself, in spite of the very complicated history, they're trying also to reach understanding by peaceful talks. Because both of you have bombs, but you don't intend to settle your dispute by bombs. And I appreciate it. So I hope very much, I pray very much, that you and India will reach peace and understanding. Pakistan is a very large country, very important people. As far as we are concerned, we don't have any conflict with Pakistan. I don't see any conflict or any reason for a conflict from the Pakistani point of view against Israel. So why do we need wars?
And how do you foresee a diplomatic relation, if at all, with Pakistan in the future?
I think it can be normal, like with India. After all, the Indians and the Pakistanis used to live together at the time, in spite of the religious differences. And even today, I think the Muslims in India are more restrained, say, than the Muslims in Iran. And I think that even you are a Muslim country, you're also a restrained country. And I was told that the extremists in Pakistan are a tiny little minority, like something like 14%, not more. And we don't impose upon anybody, but you judge not only by the bomb, by the holder of the bomb. Because if you have a bomb in a responsible hand, it is the hands that employ the bomb.
Now, there is a school of thought in Pakistan that Israel being friendly with India, Israel will be supplying military hardware to India, which probably will be used against Pakistan.
We hope not. But until now, it wasn't Israel that refused to have a dialogue with Pakistan. So, I mean, you cannot come. India recognizes Israel, has here an ambassador. We have an ambassador in New Delhi. Pakistan, until now, was either unwilling or unready, and depends upon Pakistan. We are ready to be friendly with everybody.
Now, in today's conflict, what we're seeing in the Middle East, do you feel that the role of America is more tilted towards Israel rather than perhaps towards the Arab side, whereas the French are taking the Arab side?
No, I don't think so. I think the United States helped Egypt more than anybody else to this very day. I think the United States has helped Jordan. I see the United States as having now good relations with Libya. They fight the evil forces, they helped others, and they helped many of the Arab countries. And I don't see anybody else that could do it to deter from dangerous positions and to help weak countries. And now, what sort of a help or benefit did our countries give the Arab lands that remain poor? Tell me, who is helping Syria? It remains poor and isolated and backward. And why? Because they host some terroristic headquarters in Damascus. Totally unnecessary.
Now, as far as international peace is concerned, would you say that Israel toes the American line and is a puppet of the American government, or does it have its own independent policy?
Look, to be fair, we are very grateful for America for her support. But there is one thing that you should never forget. Of all the allies that the United States has, we are the only one who never asked American soldiers to defend our lives. Never. Like the Europeans or many Asian countries. We didn't want to bother the American mothers so they'll be afraid their boys may be killed because of Israel. So we are first of all independent. We defend our lives. And I don't think that the world is divided like it used to be yesterday, between left and right, east and west, south and north. It's terror and anti-terror. So, I mean, even there is friendship between the United States and Russia and China and in India, Pakistan, whoever you want. The only distinction is, since the reason for wars was territory, that's over. Because today the source of income is high-tech. So the territorial element disappeared. You can be friends with everybody.
My final question to you would be, now all the Muslims are watching you right now all over the world. What would be your message as a former Prime Minister of Israel and today the Vice Prime Minister of Israel and of course one of those people who has won the Nobel Peace Prize? What would you say to them?
The Muslims are not our enemies. The Arabs are not our enemies. We don't have sweeping attitudes. We can feel in the Muslim world different currents, different views, and also a movement. And the real division is that there are some Muslims that think that science endangers their traditional way of life, and we say nothing whatsoever. You can be religious and scientific at the same time. Look, for example, at Turkey. And I believe a time will come, it's not far away, when all of us will have two passports, one the national and the other the global. The global will be without military content, and the national will continue our tradition without belligerency.
Mr. Shimon Peres, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
ये थे शिमोन पेरेस. आपने इनकी बातचीत सुनी, क्या इन्होंने विलेजेस दिए तो आगे क्या हुआ. फाइन, इनका एक मौक़िफ़ है, फ़लस्तीनियों का दूसरा मौक़िफ़ है. दोनों को सुनो, दोनों को सुन के हम तभी रिजॉल्व करेंगे. हम अगर इजराइलियों के सुनेंगे तो आपका ख्याल है मसला ठीक हो जाएगा? नो. फ़लस्तीनियों के सुनेंगे मसला ठीक हो जाएगा? नो। लेकिन एक चीज़ मैं आपको बता दूं, मैं जा रहा था टेल अवीव से जेरूसलम जा रहा था, तो वहाँ से फायरिंग हो रही थी। मैं तो एक आम पाकिस्तानी कवर कर रहा था ये जंग हिजबुल्लाह की, तो वहाँ से फायरिंग आ रही थी, तो टैक्सी वाला भी डर गया कि हमें गोली ना लग जाए। अब खैर वहाँ दीवार उन्होंने बना दी है, लेकिन उस साइड पे बड़े बड़े आप कह लो पैगम्बरों की कब्रें हैं, बड़े बड़े पुराने, और उस साइड पे आप जाके देखो, ये बता रहे हैं कि छलनी हुए में इस साइड से प्रिजर्व हुए हैं। क्यों? क्या बात है? गोली मार के हर चीज़, क्या गोली मसला है? नो। यही मैं हिंदुस्तान को भी कहता हूँ, गोली मसला है? नो, बातचीत मसला है। तो ये इंटरव्यू एक आई ओपनर होता है कि दूसरे का भी एक व्यू पॉइंट लो। तो यही मैं आपको दिखाना चाह रहा था। आई होप यू डिसाइड योरसेल्फ कि यू नो व्हाट यू थिंक अबाउट इट। लुक आफ्टर योरसेल्फ, as I always say, look after the interests of our country, which is Pakistan. Khuda Hafiz.